Hi, this is Sue for Parkies and Me, My Journey with Parkinson's. Today I'm speaking to Louise Taylor. Hello, Louise.
Hi, Sue, how are you?
Good, thank you. So today we're going to talk about some more legal stuff to follow on from that very good interview that you did for me on wills and also enduring power of attorney.
That sounds great.
And so we had a bit of a chat about basically what we wanted to talk about today, and I thought it would be good to talk about when somebody's been appointed in the role of enduring power of attorney. What if that goes wrong and what that might look like and how people might address that?
Yeah, sure. The very short answer is the only power to make any changes once an enduring power of attorney is in place lies with the family court. So sometimes the person themselves is dissatisfied with the actions of the enduring power of attorney. So it
Okay.
might be property and they are dissatisfied with the amount that they have had allocated to them for spending. That's a common one that people believe, rightly or wrongly, that there is more money available of their own money of it that should be being made available to them.
Okay.
And I've seen both sides of that where they are absolutely correct. Money is being withheld from them wrongly.
Hmm.
And I've been on the other side as well where the person wrongly thinks that there is more money available to them, but actually once the books are opened up, that they're not correct.
So, Louise,
Um,
can I just pick up
yeah,
on that? Um,
sure.
I've had incidences where there have been people who are in the early to mid stages with dementia,
Hmm.
and they have access to their bank account. They've been given a bank card,
Yeah, yeah.
but the person that is looking after their finances has put a limited amount of money in there so they
Yes.
can't spend thousands. Is that okay?
Yes, it is. And it's really common because that gives the subject person some independence and some freedom, but not access to sufficient money that they're going to make themselves vulnerable.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, generally speaking, yes, that is okay, as long as the amount that they've got access to is reasonable as a proportion of the total amount of money that they've got.
Hmm.
Um, so if it's, for example, if it's $20 a week that they're being given and that person has got millions, that's probably not reasonable.
Mm.
If it's $50 a week and their total assets amount to 15,000, then it is reasonable. So because the attorney, the person who holds the power of attorney, needs to think longer term and will that money, yes, it would be nice if the person could have it now for whatever they want, but if you know that there's glasses coming up and there's teeth things coming up and there's
Hearing aids
new
and things
new
like that.
winter clothes and things required, then the fact that the court has decided that on medical opinion that this person lacks capacity means that it's considered that the attorney is able to make better decisions on the whole,
Mm.
and they are entitled to access that right.
So, Louise, as they're accessing another person's money, the
Mhm.
subject person's money, what checks and balances do they have to provide accounts of what they've spent and what they've spent it on?
Yeah, enduring people with enduring powers of attorney actually don't,
Mm.
because in New Zealand we don't have a central registry and we don't have anywhere that they need to report to. It's different if somebody is a property administrator or property manager,
Hmm.
then there is a system for that. But if they have been appointed as an enduring power of attorney, there is no system. The checks and balances only come when there are sufficient concerns and somebody takes it to the family court for review, and then the family court does have review powers
So
to
when you
look
s-
at what's happened.
so so when you say somebody, can
Yep.
like if it was my mum and I thought my uncle was misusing her funds, could
Yes.
I, as a normal person,
Yes.
rock up to the court and say,
Yep.
"Hey, we need to do something about this"?
Exactly. It's designed for normal people. That's exactly the system, and you can rock up to the court. So can care home managers, social workers, police, All sorts of people have got those rights. The unfortunate thing about it is that it's possibly too late at that
Mm,
point,
mm. By the
because
time,
nobody
so,
really, yeah, the money's gone and it's
yeah.
sunk somewhere you can't get it back,
Mm,
like in holidays or somewhere like that. And at that point, it's gone. This isn't something anybody likes to do. It's usually within family factions.
mm.
So people wait until the evidence is sort of overwhelming, and understandably, but at that point, it can be difficult to get what would be truly justice for that individual.
Mm. I've found that myself. People might have a bit of a niggling concern. They can't
Yes,
quite put their finger on it, but they think, that they're maybe spending money on things that they
yeah,
don't have the money for themselves, and
yes,
the family are starting to become
yeah.
concerned that the subject person's money has gone into that person's pocket for their own use.
That's exactly right. And I often find, to be honest, it's about this time of year sometimes that you
Mm,
do get these kind of claims in the family court. And it's sometimes because over the Christmas break, a couple of family members who don't necessarily spend a lot of time together have got together and they've both said, I'm a bit worried
mm,
because my brother has just got the power of attorney activated. I know he earns a modest income,
mm.
uh, and he's driving a really flash car, which he bought a week before Christmas. And then one person might hold that in their mind and think that just seems odd. But
Mm,
sometimes another relative or someone else you discuss it with over a barbecue says, I thought
mm,
exactly the same thing. And
mm.
then you find court applications come in mid-January
Like you say,
for
people that
that kind of
don't
thing.
gather that often compare notes
Yep.
at a social gathering and both go, "Oh, I thought it was just me," and it gives
I thought it was
strength
just me.
to the
Exactly right.
argument. Yeah,
Yep. Exactly right.
and I suppose because it can happen between families, none of us like to
Mm.
think that our family members would do
No,
anything untoward to each other.
absolutely not. I think it's something quite often clients have told me that in their logical mind, it's probably been sitting there for quite a while, but they've kept pushing it to the back because it's an unpleasant thought to have.
Mm,
They've kept pushing it to the back, and it's only when there's incontrovertible evidence or somebody else confirms that their suspicions are reasonably held, then they get some strength from that and think, well, okay, that's enough.
and I
The other
sorry,
time
Karen.
I sometimes find that people make those kinds of claims are when somebody enters a care facility,
Mm, yeah.
because then there's a bit of an audit and a bit of there's extra eyes on things for a little
Mm,
while. So
mm.
sometimes that's another time at which you'll a few months later tend to get concerns raised.
I suppose too, when with a user pay system as our residential facilities are becoming, if family members know that a property was sold for X number of dollars a few months
Yeah,
ago, but there isn't
yep,
sufficient funds in the kitty to purchase a unit, what's happened in
yep,
the meantime?
yep, exactly right. And some people at that age do have reasonable wealth because they have sold the family home, and they may have been people who've been careful and modest in their living their whole life, but actually there's a reasonable asset that they've built up over that
Mm,
time. They've released the equity in that asset. So sometimes the way because they're quite frugal by nature,
mm,
the way they've carried on living, you wouldn't necessarily know.
no,
And it's sometimes when the books get opened, as you say, for looking at rest home fees, that people think, hold on, how's he qualifying for rest home fees when he just sold $1 million home?
mm,
Well, when the power of attorney just sold $1 million home, and has, just gone on a holiday around the world or something.
mm,
Things just all of a sudden don't add up. So it's those kind of things, entering new relationships.
mm.
Sometimes things come to light when the attorney or whatever enters a new relationship, or there's just some new person around with a new new lens on it.
Mm. I think sometimes too, all of this that we're talking about really does come under the heading of elder abuse, doesn't it?
It definitely does. It
And
definitely does. You've got this vulnerable person who who's well, their own individual and their own health under welfare guardianship, but also the manifestation of their life's work, their financially,
mm.
um, is sitting there and now has been handed to somebody else. So yeah, it is definitely elder abuse.
And like you were saying about family gatherings with people that don't necessarily gather that often, often there is a person in a residential facility. Like take my own mum when she was with us. I have three brothers, none of them in Christchurch.
Yeah.
I held
Yes.
enduring power of attorney from my mum.
Yes.
And if a person is depending on one individual,
Mm.
one of their adult children for everything, then if they are aware that the money's not there in some way, they don't like to tackle that person because that's the only person that they've got supporting them.
Yeah, look, that's exactly right. And I sometimes find in those situations, obviously not yours, but the the adult children who live further away, there's a sense of guilt, that they aren't doing quote unquote their fair share, and they think, "Oh, I'm not going to interfere." I've come to New Zealand for 3 weeks to spend some time with mum and my
Mm,
family. I don't actually want to spend it arguing.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then sometimes that one who does hold the enduring power of attorney is not prone to the usual scrutiny you would expect
Mm,
from family members. Not a sort of a forensic level of scrutiny, but you would expect if there were three siblings all living, in the same city, that they would have something by way of knowledge about mum or dad's financial affairs and ask
mm.
a few questions. Whereas the fly in, fly out adult children just don't ask that many questions.
And there can be little flags, can't there? Like mum needs a new pair of shoes and she's needed them for months and doesn't seem
Yeah.
to get them or doesn't get her hair done when she was
Yes.
usually fastidious about it getting her hair done.
Exactly. That's one that's quite common actually. They say, look, mum would oh, my mum passed away from dementia, but we made sure right until the end that her hair was done
Mm.
and her nails were done because she lived her life like that. Those
Yeah.
those things were really important to her, and when she was no longer able to maintain those things herself, we thought it was really important that we did on her behalf because that's who she was,
Absolutely.
um, right until the end. And you're right, if a relative or a friend or something had come in and she had chipped nails, if that was me, nobody would notice the difference because that's my life. But if it's mum, it's kind of something, like the world is coming to an end.
Mm.
So yes, those changes, if they're sort of wearing, if you've got an elderly lady who all of a sudden is wearing hospital tracksuit pants,
Mm.
and yet there should be money around, yes, absolutely, that's a red flag.
Like I said, I was enduring power of attorney for my mum, and I used to go and make sure that she had all the trousers and things that she needed and all the
Yes.
clothes that she needed. And I remember one time going to see her, and she says, "Thank you so much for buying these for me." I said, "It's all right, it's your money."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think those things are really important. And for continuity, that there's not a sense that your life is over.
Mm.
Um, you get to carry on, with most aspects of your life to the extent that you can.
Yeah, and sort of little things become important. I remember I used to buy pick and mix lollies, and she had a lolly jar, and she said she
Yeah,
bribed the staff with the lollies from the lolly
perfect.
jar, and we used to have a
Whatever
laugh
works,
about that.
I say.
Yeah,
Yeah, whatever works. There's a
absolutely.
different currency. If it's prison currency or rest home currency or whatever, there's always a currency.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's not necessarily the big things that are
No.
the sort of pointers to something being wrong. It's like you said, if your mum didn't get her hair done and somebody said, "Well,
Yeah.
she doesn't have the money," you'd be like, "Oh, well, that's
Yeah.
not right."
Yes, absolutely, because I would have made sure there was money for that almost before many other things, because it's
Mm,
something that, you know, everybody has a right to be quirky and have their own sense of what's important to them.
mm,
But likewise, if I had a client who all his life had been a betting man, never to a problem level,
yeah.
he fluttered on horses about $10 a week. But even though he only spent about $10, he won and lost that same $10. So it was basically a full-time job for him through the when he retired, through the course of the week. And the way that one of his sons worked out that things weren't going right for him financially is when he didn't have the money to have his flutter that week, in the weeks,
Mm,
because that's a relatively small sum of money that brought him a lot of pleasure and gave him continuity of what's important. So yeah, that was something when he realized, when the rest home staff told him, well, the reason, when he asked why is dad not gambling, they said, well, the reason is he hasn't got any money um, to do it, and that's what made him unravel a whole bunch of things, and we
mm,
found out what was really happening in there. So yeah, those kind of symbols, it's important, I guess, to ask uncomfortable questions
mm.
as tactfully as you possibly can, but nonetheless have hard conversations, ask uncomfortable questions, because you're doing it on behalf of somebody who can't do it for themselves. And that behoves you to just be a little stronger, have a bit more
Yes.
concrete in the spine.
Absolutely. And I think when a person is looking at acting as an enduring power of attorney for a parent or anybody in the family, and it usually is within the family, I feel that they
Mm,
should look into and ask what those responsibilities are, because
yeah,
they're a huge responsibility.
it is. And I sometimes wish people had have said no when it's a job that they've taken on reluctantly. They don't really want to do it. For whatever reason, they have said yes, but it seems to burden them massively. They do the absolute minimum. And sometimes I wonder, was the donor, the person who's now the subject person, did they have three people to choose from and they just randomly chose this individual? I wish
Mm,
they'd have chosen somebody else who had more interest and more capability to actually look after their own interests. So I think, yeah, I wish more people knew what they were getting into, asked more questions, and if it was something that they weren't willing to do, I wish they'd had said at the time.
absolutely. Actually, that brings a question to mind, Louise. What's
Hmm,
the youngest a person can act on behalf of another person in these roles?
20.
20. Okay. Because
20.
is it 20 or 18?
It's actually, I was checking it before, actually, for that very reason. Um, it's 20 for property administration
Yeah.
and property management. I'll just check it. Oh, it might be 18.
I know it's quite
You're
young.
right, it's 18. Yep, it is 18, which is incredibly young. Considering at 18 you can barely manage your own finances,
Absolutely.
um, more or less anybody else's. I'd think hard if I was appointing an 18-year-old.
Yeah, and
So I think, yeah,
the reason that I
mm,
asked that question is, as you know, have only just retired as a social worker,
yes,
and we would have somebody that was going into residential care that was had no capacity, and there might be the only person that sort of supported them was an 18-year-old granddaughter
yeah,
or something, and the team would say
yes,
they're old enough, they're 18, they're old enough legally
mm,
to do that. And it didn't sit well with me, for an 18-year-old
yeah,
just going out in the world to have that responsibility is huge.
yeah. And I have known one of those situations exactly where the 19-year-old in this case was incredibly burdened by
Mm,
this. She was trying to start her life and study, and you're in that transition from school to work, and your adult life is just beginning. And then she had this placed on top of her, and it was actually just too much for her. I think it's probably a specific example of a more general principle that just because something is legal does not make it a good idea.
Mm, mm.
There's many legal things that are bad ideas for individual people for specific reasons. And I think this is just one of those general things.
And there's
18.
another scenario apart from the age,
Mhm.
is people automatically assume that the spouse is the appropriate person, where they may not
Yes.
have had a healthy relationship, and then all
Mm,
of a sudden you say you're his husband or wife,
yeah.
and therefore legally you should be doing this. It's not necessarily the
Yes.
case.
No, not at all. And it is really important that people update their powers of attorney when, certainly when a relationship ends, but also when they become uncertain about a relationship,
Mm,
which can be a long time before it ends,
yes.
is to get that power of attorney replaced with a new one or
Mm,
ripped up. People often, when they look back or when they've just left a relationship, they'll sometimes look back 10 years, 20 years and say, I knew then,
mm.
but I've been staying for this reason or that reason or whatever it is. So, yep, really important to, it's a living document. It's important that you keep reviewing it and keep looking at whether you've made the best choice.
So is there anything more that we need to say? Because we could end it about here if
Yeah,
you like.
yeah, look, I think in terms of EPAs, I think the most important things are pretty much anybody can challenge them, but they will have to prove, so they'll have to go to the family court and provide evidence for their concerns. And what they're asking the family court to do then is to essentially audit the attorney
Mm,
as to whether they have fulfilled the responsibilities of the role. But it's retrospective, it's something that's not done on a schedule,
yeah.
like it is with a property manager. It's done retrospectively, and I'm not saying you need hard copy evidence, but you need to be able to at least articulate what your concerns are.
So, like you say, enduring power of attorney, there's no kind of monitoring of it as such. So,
Yeah.
what would happen if somebody, I was reading, if somebody had been asked to be enduring power of attorney, say 15 years ago, and
Mhm.
in their mind they were still enduring power of attorney, and then somebody else pops up and said, "Oh no, 10 years
Right.
ago
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
appointed." How does that work itself out?
Yep. Actually, it's not at all uncommon. Um, as a person's gone through different relationships, different phases and stages of life, just tend to forget what happened before.
Mm.
The most, the power of attorney document that is the most recent to the time when the person loses capacity is the one that prevails.
So
So all of those other ones are just irrelevant.
should the previous people that were appointed or asked to be appointed, should they be notified in any way?
No,
Okay.
um, no, it'll just be the most recent one. And look, it does happen that, let's say, an enduring power of attorney was made in 2020. Person loses capacity. It's that one is activated, and then you find out later on that there was another one made in 2024 for a different person. That, in which case, that 2020 attorney must stop acting, and
Yeah.
the 2024 one takes over.
Okay.
Because there's no central system, there's nowhere to register these documents.
Mm.
So that kind of scattered sort of chaos does happen.
So it's a complex piece of legal, what would you call it?
Yeah.
It is a
Well,
complex thing, isn't it?
it is. The concept is really simple, but you add humans into it and it makes everything chaotic.
Absolutely. So the what would your take home message be?
I encourage people to have enduring powers of attorney for property and for welfare. Gives you control long past the point where you lose capacity. So I think they are a good thing. I encourage them. I also encourage you to let the people close to you know where they are and
Yeah.
who you have appointed and put them somewhere central. And if your circumstances change, review your power of attorney. Is it still the person you believe will act in your best interests?
It sounds like very wise words from a very wise woman.
Oh, from time to time, see.
Well, thank you, Louise. And
Pleasure.
no doubt
Always a
we'll
pleasure.
catch up again.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been Sue for Parkinson Me, My Journey with Parkinson's, and Louise Taylor.
Thank you, Sue.